it's Dani again, reading the next chapter of Dark Tales of Cursed Children. I hope you really enjoy this one. It's going to be good, because this is one of Mr. Aeen's memories of the funniest thing he ever saw. So enjoy! Chapter 7, Tito, September 14th, 2011, Wednesday. At 3:06 p.m., Scarlett James exited the gates of Sorrow Springs Junior High School, heading home on 20th Street. She felt depressed with her head hung low, but she knew she shouldn't have. She didn't know why she thought Camden would ask her to go to the fall harvest dance. Why would a 10th grader want to be seen with an 8th grader, she thought. But then every time they passed each other on campus, he'd look at her and give her that charming Graham smile of his. Scarlett knew Camden must have liked her. She just knew things like that. So why hadn't he asked her to go? She decided to cut him some slack. The dance was still over a week away. Scarlett looked up and caught a sight of Owen a few yards ahead of her. She walked faster until she caught up to him. Then she smacked the back of his head and said, "Wait up for me, you dork!" "Ouch!" yelled Owen as he flinched away from her. "You know something? I'm always tense around you because I don't know when you're going to attack me." She rolled her eyes at him and said, "Don't be such a drama queen." Where are all your girlfriends?" he said, rubbing the back of his head. "You know most of my friends are guys," she said matter-of-factly. "Most girls don't enjoy the company of me." "I don't blame them," said Owen. "They're probably afraid of getting smacked by you." "Too bad you're not that smart, even with your dorky glasses back on," she laughed. "Well, I need to see where I'm going," he replied. He watched her walking next to him. She was so pretty and different, he thought, especially when she laughed and he could see her dimples. And then he had an idea. "Hey, Scarlett, are you hungry?" he asked her. "It depends. What do you have in mind?" She wore black jeans and a black denim jacket, which made her red hair and green eyes stand out more. He could never get tired of looking at her. Her green eyes looked so dangerous. "I can't tell you until we get to Fox's." Scarlett looked at him and frowned for a moment. Then she tugged hard on his backpack until he fell on his butt. "Fine, I'll race you there. Loser pays." By the time Owen got up and dusted himself, Scarlett was halfway down 20th Street and Lambeau Drive. He started in pain and tried to catch up to her. Owen found Scarlett leaning against the wall of Fox's convenience store. She had one foot against the wall and her arms crossed. "So what are you buying me?" she said. He faced her and then tried to catch his breath. "Okay, Scarlett James, this is a two-man job. You distract the cashier by asking him stupid questions. I'm going to open a large bag of hot Cheetos and dump tons of nacho cheese and chili inside. The cashier doesn't like so much nacho cheese and chili wasted on one customer. Don't forget to get drinks." Scarlett smiled at him with excitement and said, "Let's do it. I knew there was a reason I'm still friends with you." Owen gave her $5, opened the door to Fox's, and they both stepped in. The cashier was helping in a line of 3 customers. He was a pale, overweight man that wheezed when he breathed. He was wide as he was tall. His voice was unusually high-pitched when he spoke to customers. He wore a U.S. flag bandana to cover the bald spot on his head. His uniform was a beige vest with a name tag that read Tito. He constantly used his forearm to wipe the beads of sweat off his forehead. Scarlett filled up a large cup with Mountain Dew and waited in line. Tito kept glancing at Owen. When it was Scarlett's turn, she placed the cup of soda and the $5 in front of the cashier. He rang her up and started taking out the change to give back to her. Owen opened a bag of hot Cheetos and began working the nacho, cheese, and chili dispensers with stealth, alternating between the two. Before Tito dumped the change in Scarlett's hands, he got ready to look back at Owen. That's when Scarlett moved her hands and let the change fall on the counter in the floor, where Tito stood. Tito didn't get a chance to check up on Owen. "I'm so sorry, sir," said Scarlett. "That's all right, darling," said Tito, bending down to uncomfortably pick up the dropped change. When Scarlett looked at Owen, he seemed to be having trouble with one of the buttons. He circled his index finger at her. She knew what that meant. Scarlett had to keep Tito distracted for a while longer. Tito stood up and carefully placed the change on the counter. Excuse me, sir?" asked Scarlett in her pretentious little girl voice. "Yes," replied Tito, sounding irritable. "Could you please tell me which quarters I got? I have trouble reading small print." He looked at her suspiciously and said, "Okay." He picked up the 2 quarters, flipped one of them, and leaned on the counter with his chubby forearms. Tito studied them for a second before he said, "You've got Massachusetts and Rhode Islands." Owen gave Scarlett the thumbs up and walked around to her. "Thank you so much," she said, followed by fake giggles. Then she grabbed her change and soda and walked out of Fox's convenience store. Owen showed the bag of hot Cheetos to Tito, dropped $3 on the counter, and rushed out. "Keep the change," he yelled behind him. "What took so long?" said Scarlett, aiming for the steaming bag of hot Cheetos. Owen grabbed her hand and ran off on Lambeau Drive. "Hey, what are you doing?" "Look back," Owen yelled, still pulling Scarlett with her. She looked back to find Tito coming out of the double doors, shaking his fists at him. She started to laugh. "You rotten teenagers! I'll call the cops on you next time," Tito yelled behind them. Scarlett and Owen didn't stop running until they reached the corner of 21st Street and Lambeau Drive, still laughing hysterically. Owen let go of Scarlett's hand. "Oh my God, that was so funny," said Scarlett, now using her fingers to scoop up a few pieces of hot Cheetos covered in yellow cheese and brown chili. "Wow, this is actually good, even though it looks like disgusting dog food." "It's one of my masterpieces," he said smugly as they crossed the street. "Why did you turn into such a small-time thief?" she said, now taking a big gulp from the soda. Owen dug in the bag before he said, "Since we stopped hanging out in, 6th grade." For the first time in a long time, Owen saw her face turn serious and dark. Now she looked more frightening than ever. "It's not like that, Owen. It's okay, Scarlett," he said. "I was just kidding. I know, we just got older and started doing our own things. I get it. You're still one of my best friends, Owen," she said, her smile and dimples returning. "I mean, I don't have a choice between anyone, because, we're neighbors," she teased him. Owen rolled his eyes at her, grabbed the soda from her hand, and took a big swig. "I know, we're cool, Scarlett," he said without looking at her. "Well, maybe it's time to hang out a little more," she said, "now that I've discovered your criminal adventurous side. Just make sure Esther Clutterbuck is cool with it." Then she laughed at him. Owen shook his head and said, "Come on, cut it out with Esther already. I told you it's not like that with her." "Okay, fine. I guess I can be nice to you for just a tiny bit," she said, forcing a fake smile. "Do you remember when we were kids in 2nd grade? He looked up at her and cocked his head to the side like a curious puppy. "It depends. That was a long time ago." Now they were crossing the Fox River Bridge into Green Bay. "You were so adorable," she squealed. "What? Do you remember when you used to hold my hand when we walked to school back home?" He nodded and smiled nostalgically at her. "You said you were protecting me from stranger danger, even though our parents were right behind us." "Yeah, I remember," he said. He sighed longingly. "I always tried to look after you. I was the older, remember? Hey, how about that time in 5th grade when you went biking at the Vale with your friend Judah?" she asked, trying very hard not to break out in laughter. That incident with Judah was the funniest thing she'd ever witnessed in her life. Usually she'd laugh about it so hard that she'd end up hiccuping for an hour. Sometimes in class, she'd think about it and start to laugh. It made the other students around her uncomfortable, like she was a complete lunatic. "Please tell it again." There was no denying her. Now Owen was excited to recount that story. He felt so happy to be with her again. Why couldn't it always be like this with her? He knew the answer, but he didn't wanted to admit it to himself. "Okay, you better get ready for this, because you know you'll pee your pants." It was the first weekend of winter break. Judah called me and wanted to go bike riding at the new spot. We lied to our parents and said we were going to the park. I should have known better. Judah always did reckless things. Anyway, we followed him across the river to Spire Springs. He came because he said he knew a Walking Dead person. So we stopped at the old foster home and Judah threw a rock at the door. He was too afraid to knock. He said the owner of the house kidnapped children. That's why so many kids lived there. So the owner of the house, Mr. Dean, opened the door and looked at us. Judah screamed and took off. But you just stood there and stared at him like you were in this deep trance. So I grabbed your arm and tried to pull you. Finally, you snapped out of it and we raced away to the Vale. Okay, get up to the funny part now, she said with anticipation. Okay. So Judah had discovered this dirt path that went winding up to the top of the Vale. We followed him and rode our bikes all the way to the top. We were above the fog and still couldn't see the bay. When we started racing down the path with Judah in front, I freaked out and slowed down. You slowed down to make sure I was okay, but Judah kept going. From behind, we saw the whole thing. There was an old Jeep that was parked to the side of the path that wasn't there when we rode up. And Judah freaked out and panicked. His bike was wobbling and couldn't slow down. He screamed and then hit the back of the Jeep at full speed. He and his bike launched and tumbled forward of the Jeep, but only he landed on the front of the car. It happened so fast that we missed it too. Scarlett had already started to laugh. "Go on," she managed to blurt out. So we got off our bikes and ran to him. He was sprawled on his back and unconscious. I was screaming at him to wake up while you were slapping his face. We were so scared that we didn't pay attention to Judah's missing bike. Suddenly, Judah opened his eyes, looking straight up, and then he screamed so loud that I swear it echoed throughout all the Vale and across the bay. Anyway, when Judah opened his eyes, the first thing he saw was his bike hanging off a tree branch 25 feet directly above his head. That's when he rolled out of the way, thinking he was falling on it. He never got his bike back. I wonder if it's still up there. Scarlett was now on her side on the sidewalk, slapping her thigh over and over. The laughter was trapped inside her, and she couldn't get it out. A couple of cars slowed down to see what was happening. Owen shook his head and waved the cars off. Then he grabbed Scarlett's arms and pulled her up. "Oh, God, that was good. It never gets old," she said in between bursts of laughter. Scarlett and Owen made a left on Larson Street. They were almost home. This was the most fun he'd had in a long time. He missed hanging out with her so much. And then it happened. As they walked together side by side, Scarlett rested her hand on his shoulder closest to her and then let it slide down his arm until she locked hands with him. They looked into each other's eyes for a lingering moment. Her emerald eyes were teary and sparkling from laughing so much. The descending sun shone directly on her hair, making it glow like fire. They walked the rest of the way, holding hands in silence, except for Scarlett's hiccups. Thanks for watching Chapter 7, Tito, of Dark Tales of Cursed Children. For last time's question, remember that Owen was acting a bit weird, and it was because Owen had put the card in Scarlett's locker. Now, this video's question is, what happened to Scarlett whenever she thought about the story in class, and why were the students staring at her and thinking she was crazy? That's all for now. Make sure to like, subscribe, smash notifications, and leave a comment below.